Chapter 8. The Tech Boom and Bust Cycle. With the rise of the personal computer and the internet, both parties threw themselves at these new tech giants, eating up anything they said as gospel truth. The Democrats, which from the 50s to the 90s were all about enforcing labor laws, got tons and tons of money from tech corporations, along with socially progressive support and warm fuzzies from TED Talks, so they were blindsided as tech and automation began destroying jobs at a rapid pace. Then, when they began using tech loopholes to get around labor laws, creating the gig economy, which began destroying good-paying jobs quickly. All the while, these companies talk about how good and innovative they are, even though all their core technology was paid for by us, the taxpayers. And here we are now, thinking that corporations just recently became evil. They were evil from their very inception. People say they are amoral, but the founders believe them quite rightly to be immoral, through a chain of deniability and planned ignorance by the owners. And what is sad is that being pro-business is not exactly pro-business, it's pro-corporation. Thanks to corporations being involved in politics and lobbying, the government cut down on their taxes and slashed government science research, slowing down our advances as a planet. One generation taxes their wealthy and pumps money into their infrastructure, open sourcing, and science and labor, and the next generation of corporations that spawn from that end up lobbying to slow down that tech boom, reduce innovations, sit on patents that should be open source, like when they got into business, and crush labor. Then we have to reorganize and figure out how to get us back to that point again, which at this point seems to take about 100 years, if you count the research booms of the 1860s and the 1960s. If we go at this rate, we won't see another big research boom until the 2060s, and I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait that long. Corporations are also set up to make the most money possible in the short term, ignoring the long-term consequences. CEOs must constantly produce a profit or lose their jobs, even if retooling and spending on worker education or innovation would help the company stay afloat longer. This can destroy old behemoths that fail to innovate, which is just fine for the stockholders if the businesses that replace them aren't unionized. In fact, there's an entire industry of private equity firms buying up failing companies, screwing workers out of their pensions with bankruptcy laws, and breaking the company up and selling off parts of what should have been a viable long-term company. In the long term, a government that is not corrupt, provides for the people, educates its population, builds good infrastructure, spends a large chunk on research, doesn't entangle itself in pointless conflicts, forces everyone to pay a fair wage to create a robust middle class that can buy a large quantity of things, is best for business long term, but it's terrible for short term gain, so corporations will just naturally do everything they can to damage this and feast off the gaping wound. Chapter 9. The Power of PR. Corporations use marketing and public relations to create doubt in populations about things they are doing, even when the science is very clear about it. They started with lead, denigrating the scientists who brought up that lead shouldn't be used in gas, as it was making kids dumber and more violent, dropping their IQs and impulse control. They did it for pollution. Sugar companies were able to blame fat for health problems that they caused with enough marketing and dollars. Tobacco used immoral cash to make people doubt just how strong the link between lung cancer and addictions and smoking actually was, using astroturfing, fake grassroots activism, to make the politicians think the average voter actually cared about these issues. And now here we are with climate change. No bigger smear campaign has been waged as to make people doubt the science of validity. Not only making people hate and doubt climate scientists, but all science is now up for debate by people who have no real understanding of it, getting the government to defund a lot of science research. We could have easily fixed climate change back in the 80s, had we jumped on it when we first began seeing serious data that Exxon knew back in the 70s, which would have happened if we had created another space race style spending into research and created cheap clean energy quickly. But the companies that own coal and oil couldn't lose all that money in the ground even though it was the moral thing to do. Instead, they actively worked to prevent new fuel resources and made climate change a polarized issue instead of what used to be bipartisan, dividing our nation at the very seams. Quite often, instead of innovating, companies that know how to do things cheaply will instead just adjust the flavors or varieties and milk it for all it's worth, giving us the illusion of variety and choice and focusing on marketing over innovation. Marketing is great for corporations, but it's not so great for smaller mid-sized businesses who can't compete. You innovate or die quickly. Giant corporations can take hundreds of years to die. Former innovation tech companies often stop innovating and instead just buy up other startups, either to mass produce or suppress an innovation that would make some of their own products obsolete, but will slow its entry into the population and retain a monopoly on it to keep prices high. Robotics, Google, food processing companies, multimedia companies, and medical companies all act more like innovation brokers and invention banks as opposed to innovators themselves. Corporations must also grow, so they can't make their products too high quality, or they can't have repeat customers. Planned obsolescence is essential to the corporate model. If people had good quality things that don't break or lose their usefulness, no one will buy en masse, and a company may have to invest in new things people may actually want, instead of making things that break and creating trash and wasted energy, but with a lot less profit. Chapter 10, A Road Not Taken. It didn't have to be this way. We didn't have to be run by corporations. We could still have a free market without corporations, with all the economies of scale that corporations provided. The founders never wanted this. Adams believed that no matter what, the wealthy would always acquire more and more until liberties and political imbalance ruled. Jefferson believed that it would all be balanced until we left our agrarian roots, even though his pushing for standardized parts is what gave us the Second Industrial Revolution, removing us from an agrarian society. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon is considered the father of anarchism, but his ideas are considered rather weak for modern anarchs, and now label his theories as mutualism. It's a midway alternative between Marx's concept of capitalism and socialism. We would still have a free market, but make corporations illegal again, and making the workers part owners and runners of the company, with either direct democracy in the workplace or a representative democracy depending on which worked better for the company. At the moment, cooperatives can't compete with corporations because they focus more on their impacts on community and human health and labor, so they can't survive in direct competitions to organizations that solely focus on profit. With corporations out of the way, cooperatives would be able to survive and thrive without wrecking the environment and ignoring the workers who actually do the job, instead of someone whose sole job it is to squeeze out profit in a year. A B Corp is a concept that requires half the board of a company to be elected representatives of the workers who have to live and work in the community, so that profits for shareholders are only half the equation. Elizabeth Warren recently put forth a bill forcing all corporations to become B Corps. That would be great for America, but terrible for short-term corporate gains, so that won't happen. Another midpoint idea is to jack up corporate taxes, but give B Corps very low taxes. And if you say that democracy in the workplace won't work, Germany has been doing it on a small scale since the end of the war with unions baked into them. Having a say in corporate decisions and in hiring and firing instead of just blocking people from getting fired like what Taft-Hartley did. Another example that anarchs love to point to, but is actually a perfect example of mutualism succeeding, is the Mondragon Corporation of Spain, which is a worker-owned and run company with radical efficiency, employee satisfaction, and high quality of work. The workers are in the driver's seat of the company and have a say in their leadership. They aren't working for the man, they are their own man, and they own their labor and are not alienated from their labor, things both Adam Smith and Marx pointed out as serious problems in corporations. Chapter 11. Inevitable Hell from Inaction. Now we get to the extreme end of Marx's prediction, that automation will replace the worker and the wealthy will own all the means of production, and we won't, similar to a lord owning a land, and we poor serfs, if we are lucky enough, will be able to work for pennies, while many will live homeless and will only pick up as automation continues to destroy good-paying, low-education jobs like trucking and the skilled trades. If education costs money, it becomes akin to the company store, and education institutions corner the market and can jack up prices, as it is the only method to upward mobility, and you spend the rest of your life trying to pay off your debt, working at a job you hate, just to keep yourself above water. It's why the idea of an automation tax and a carbon tax to pay for a guaranteed basic income, recommended by tech moguls like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, because no one can buy their stuff, and their business model will collapse without the customers, is not such a bad idea. Carbon tax can be divided equally among the nation as energy credits to offset the rising prices and give choice to people as to what kind of energy they want to buy until clean tech and infrastructure can catch up to carbon energy costs. Automation, whose underpinning was paid for by our tax dollars, now throw people out of work at a faster and faster rate. A tax could slow that down a little bit, allowing us all equally to get a return on our tax investment in research spending. If nothing else, equal money for food, healthcare, education, and housing should be free to all, as thanks to automation, economies of scale make them all affordable and cheap. But thanks to our corporate tactics, jack all their prices up, creating a glut of both food and housing, with food that rots while people go hungry, and houses that sit empty while people are homeless. And depending on how you calculate the math, just making them free would actually save taxpayers money. Corporations don't just become evil. They've always been evil. They were created as amoral institutions that created a chain of deniability, snatched up political power because it made stockholder money, created a wall of deniability and ignorance for their shareholders, colonized and destroyed civilizations, locked people into slavery, harsh labor, or sweatshops, either legally or illegally, and used intimidation and coercion to do one thing: get their shareholders' profits by any means necessary. Laws, ethics, and labor be damned. Morality is just another word for bad business strategies in corporations, and instead of taking us back to the first 100 years of the nation and removing bankruptcy protections from corporations, government instead plays whack-a-mole with regulations when enough people get hurt by one corporation or another, which is always and will always be just a temporary fix. Corporations are evil and must be ended if our planet is to survive, and if we wish to enjoy any of the fruits of our labors and have a happy, prosperous future. The future is up to us. We can have prosperity for all on a living planet, or prosperity for few on a dying one. The decision is up to us, and how we view and handle corporations who care about nothing more than making money. A big thank you goes out to Elias Garcia Guevara and Joe Taylor, who sponsor the show at $10 a month at the Wapawet level on Patreon. Please consider donating as well if you can, and thank you all for listening.